Welcome to the Troxel podcast. I'm Evan Troxel, and in this special partner episode, I welcome Jack Sadler. Jack is the co-founder and CEO of Part3, a construction administration platform built specifically for architects and design teams. He's the first to admit he's not an architect. His background is in technology, years in vertical SaaS across healthcare, finance, and travel, plus a long run of custom software, like the 0 to 1 kind where you get dropped into a new business model and build something from nothing. The construction piece came from home. His wife studied architectural science and spent years on site for a general contractor before moving to an architecture firm where she went from purpose-built tools to running everything out of spreadsheets and email. They saw that gap up close, and Part3 is what came out of it. Here's the thing that makes this conversation worth your time. Construction administration is the phase where a project either gets built the way it was designed or it doesn't. As Jack puts it, CA is where design intent gets realized or negotiated away. And too often, architects walk into that phase having handed control to someone else, the contractor's software, the contractor's workflows, the contractor's version of what happened. Their own record lives in email and spreadsheets, not discoverable, not defensible. In this episode, we explore why CA became a cost center instead of a profit center, how AI can automate the administrative grind without touching professional judgment, and what it actually takes to get a famously change-resistant profession to adopt something new. We talk about the context-switching tax, the role of internal champions, and a future where architects show up to CA as conductors rather than data entry clerks. I especially appreciate Jack's reframe of control. He argues architects haven't lost control of CA because they wanted to give it up. They've lost it by default, by letting decisions about tools and workflows get made without them. Taking it back isn't about taking on more responsibility. It's about owning what you're already accountable for. That's a different conversation than most of the AI hype out there, and it's one I think this industry needs to be having right now. As usual, there's an extensive amount of additional information in the show notes, so please be sure to check that out. You can find it directly in your podcast app if you're a paid supporter of Troxel Plus, and if you're a free member, you can find them over at the website, which is trxl.co. So, without further ado, I bring you my conversation with Jack Sadler. Jack, welcome. It's great to have you on the podcast.
Really good to be here, Evan. I'm excited.
So, okay, let's start off with kind of your trajectory in this industry. I know you're not you're not coming from a traditional space in this industry, but that doesn't mean that you don't have a great perspective on it. So let's hear it.
Yeah, that's totally fair. No, I feel like everywhere I go, I slap up a big slide that says I am not an architect. No one wants me working on site, other than one summer I did, which was absolutely terrible as a kid. But no, my background has always been in technology. I've worked in vertical SaaS in different industries, whether it was healthcare, finance, travel for a while. But the longest passion I had was custom software, being thrown into different business models, different ideas, building something from scratch, kind of like doing the whole cliche 0 to 1 thing. Okay. I got pulled into construction in a few different capacities, helped launch some apps in different spaces, predominantly for general contractors. But my wife is in construction. She went to school for architectural science. She worked for a general contractor on site for 6 or 7 years before she jumped ship and came to work for an architecture firm. And when she was doing that and I was doing custom software, we kind of saw her go from that role in a contractor with so many different tools, so many different apps, and everything's available to you, to suddenly working out of spreadsheets and emails and exactly what we're all used to on the architectural side. So then we decided, well, maybe I could help find something off the shelf. One thing led to another, and then we ended up building our own tool, finding an opportunity, and here we are. Now we're running Part3. Part3 is a software for architects to manage all things construction administration. We're building intelligent collaborative workflows to help them manage every aspect of managing and issuing drawings, staying on top of site visits, reviewing shops, RFIs, and kind of taking back control of that whole CA phase. I think that's the quickest way I can sum up an 8-year journey.
Nice elevator pitch right there. And you mentioned your wife works for a contractor or worked for a contractor. And so what's interesting to me about what you just said was you actually built this tool for architects. And because contractors do have tools for this kind of thing that have come around in the last decade, let's just say. I mean, there's Procore, there's other options out there, right? I'm not on the construction side, but I think you also kind of named a rough spot for architects because there's not always a CA phase on projects, depending on the kind of work you're doing or what you get hired for or what the client wants to pay for. And but when it does happen, it is a lot of information shuffling, right? It's like you're living in spreadsheets, you're living in email traditionally, right? And so what you're talking about is something kind of purpose built for the architecture audience to be able to manage the CA process when they're working on a project.
I couldn't have said it better. Yeah, you nailed it.
Nice.
Everything on the contractor side with so many options. Procore's the big one. There's Autodesk, there's eBuilder, Trimble has solutions, that Aconex has got. There's so many. And there's all kinds of sizes, right? There's the really big, the really small, and everything in between. As soon as it falls to an architect and the design team, we just find ourselves using those tools. So we find ourselves living out of Procore, living out of Autodesk, and they're all someone else's tool, which means we've accidentally let the contractor not only decide the software, but we've let them decide how the workflows are going to run, what the team responsibilities are going to be, what the rules and the data tells us about how the project went. Everything is told from one perspective. Now, that's not a bad thing when everything goes really well. The bad things come from, software design for one person is usually poorly designed for the other. So architects and contractors have really different jobs to do during CA. And letting the contractor control the story, the narrative, the data, the workflows. If something does go wrong, it makes it very difficult to kind of tell your story, tell your side of events when yours lives in spreadsheets and email and is not discoverable and not easy to track. So you're absolutely right. That becomes the journey. We wanted to build something that was completely tailored towards how designers work, how designers need to run CA, and just limit to their scope and their responsibility.
So, and I think that's the other distinction here that we should make early is that this is a super risky phase for architects. I mean, this is when design intent it becomes realized, and the problem solving continues. The design continues through that process as challenges arise that were unforeseen or you left out because there wasn't enough time or inadvertently left out. All of the reasons, right? And so. Can you just talk about like what that liability, since your wife, I mean, has worked on both sides of this, I'm sure you have and you're working with clients now who can really kind of put words to describe that risk and what they want to avoid in this process.
There's risk on different levels, right? There's different ways to think of it. There's the standard sort of prep for litigation and, cover your ass type stuff. But then there is also the business model risk. Fact that CA is typically not a revenue generating phase or it's not a profitable phase despite being revenue generating. But yeah, I think the sort of favorite quotes is like, I think of CA as the phase where design intent is realized or negotiated away. And too often it's the latter.
I love that. That. I mean, I don't love that, but I mean, that's a really good way to put it because oftentimes value engineering is still happening in the CA phase for a lot of during the construction process because I don't know, there's lots of reasons, right? And so, that's a really interesting way to put it, to just say it bluntly, right? It's like, it's where design intent gets realized or negotiated away.
Yeah. And it becomes tough because the people on the job, they kind of need to straddle both sides. You need to recognize that we maybe scoped and designed this project 2 years ago, potentially in a really different market, different macro climate. So you have to be open to change. But the client, who knows what they've been through in that 2 years as well, value engineering, there's good reasons for it. You just want to make sure you protect what's important, protect that design intent.
And that time pressure, there's like a major time pressure in that phase, right? It's like you don't want to slow down the process and create schedule delays and all those things. And so it's like jump through all kinds of hoops and to make sure things happening as fast as possible because you don't want to be take on more risk through that liability of taking too long to answer something.
Yeah, which really is where we spend most of our time talking to architects. One of my favorite quotes, for the same reason like you, I also hate it, but one of the quotes I sort of reuse most often is a principal of a firm said to me, the whole goal in CA is to not lose all the money we made in design. And in a nutshell, that's the reason Part 3 exists. That is the reason that there is enough sort of motivation to solve this and do things differently. And I totally get it. It's a tough job to perform and to do well, and it's even tougher to do it in a way that can still make you money.
Yeah. I mean, this is also, it makes me think about having all your information in one place makes a lot of sense at this point, because it's like, where do you find it if you don't have it all in one place? It could be in lots of different places, right? Especially nowadays with all the various cloud-hosted file servers and email and Slack and Teams and all the things, right? And so it actually makes a lot of sense to have a single source of truth, at least for your firm, your architecture firm, in this regard. So why did you decide to build something for the architect first and not the GC first?
Because I didn't listen to anyone's advice.
Okay, so you're a rebel. I get it. Okay.
There's some truth in that. When we started Part 3, I can't tell you how many investors, venture capitalists, how many people told me, even other entrepreneurs in our industry, that told me, you cannot build a business off of architects. Architects are too cheap. Architects won't pay for anything. No one cares about CA. There was lots of reasons not to. We genuinely just felt like the problem had been unsolved for too long, and there is no real great solution, right? So it was against best advice, which at first was starting to look like it might be true for a while. I'm happy to say now we've been doing this a long time, and I'm sticking with it. I'm happy we did it. I'm happy we're working with and for architects, but you all made it pretty tough in those early days for us, that's for sure.
I wish I had a camera on the audience right now, because I wonder which direction their head is shaking or nodding, right? It's like, yep, I agree, or nope, that's not me. I really am curious to kind of see what that response is to that. But I mean, you're not wrong, right? There's only so much appetite for new tools, new ways of doing things, and the investment that it requires. Some people, I almost said expense, right? But the investment that it requires to train and to standardize and get teams to use the full functionality of tools so that you can actually get the leverage out of them and the value that you want. There's many challenges. I don't envy any of those startups out there who are creating new things that are different / better / whatever the right words are than the kind of what you might call just the incumbents that have been around for a long time, who maybe do some of the things, but maybe they don't do them all extremely well.
I mean, you're always up against inertia. The way we've done things isn't broken. It's difficult to convince that there's genuinely a better way of doing things. It's worth the change. I mean, put yourself in the shoes of a typical project architect at a typical SMB firm. That project architect is probably working on 4, 5, 6 different projects at any given time. 3 or 4 of them are in construction. 2 of those contractors are using Procore. One's using Autodesk. One's using eBuilder, or one's just sending emails and doing everything manually. That architect system of record is a huge mix of emails that come from software generated emails to personal emails, and then they cobble everything together and upload, download, stick things on a drive, stick things on the contractor software. There's no standardization. There's no single way of working. So suddenly telling them, telling them, oh, there are ways of doing this differently is a tough story to show. But it's usually, I think, the advice we always got early on, that architects will be difficult to adopt and to try new things. But I think the flip side of that is when they do, they're incredibly loyal. So we found that some of the unit economics that make a startup click. In the early days, it wasn't easy to get new customers on board, but when they did, they tend to stick, they tend to grow, they tend to use it more and more and more. So the unit economics on the back end were really, really powerful, and we were able to show architects, when they do find that eureka light bulb moment, they really stick with it. They're really happy. And that's when inertia changes. That's when you get the rollout. You just got to build those internal champions. So I know the people listening to this podcast is a good mix. There's probably a lot of the early adopters. Hopefully even some people that were our early adopters are sitting there shaking their heads furiously at me saying, we took a risk. because they do exist. There are a lot of early adopter architects out there, but the industry to generalize, is typically not easy to break into with new software.
Well, and there's this attitude of it's not broken, but I think if you were to objectionally, like, let's take a step back and let's define broken. Because I think that's a story we tell ourselves, is that it's not broken. I already know how to do it because this is the way that I've done it. And so it's a known quantity. And so while it may not be painless, it's one of those things where it's still broken, right? And so I think one of the things that you hear all the time is that something's got to be like 10 times better for me to even consider using it, right? I mean, is that kind of what you're seeing from clients? And so, what you're saying is what you've got is 10 times better than their broken system.
Oh, sure. But I think that bar is increasing, and I think the world right now, where we're seeing so many new tools with AI promises, AI features, AI value, I think that 10 times bar, I think that's actually going up. I think people expect something to be 20 times, 30 times. Like, I want it to do it all, not just a part of it, and less willing to compromise on something that does part of it but still has some gaps. You need that one-stop shop that's going to take care of everything. So I think the bar's actually gone up. But you're right, like, definition of broken, or if it's litigious, if it's argumentative, if it's risky and we don't make money despite staffing our most senior people on CA, there's a good argument there that it is in fact slightly broken.
Well, and to push that farther along, if tools nowadays actually can help you make your business smarter for the next time, like, that's a huge win, right? Because if you can get over those hurdles of like, where did I even put that? And how did we decide to do this in those other projects? Versus now you've potentially have the ability with AI and, to surface insights on top of structured data, right? Like, that's kind of the key part, I think, for the audience here that understands what we're talking about. It's like, you kind of have to have the one before the other, and this is a way to get there as well, to make your firm smarter so that it actually makes you more valuable and gives you more leverage over time.
It's a good point. I used to be asked a lot, when AI was just sort of popping up, what's a good first step we can all take? And I think the answer at the time was always, AI will be good at handling and making sense of unstructured data. So the first thing you can do is just organize that data. Make sure reports and PDFs live in a place. Make sure you own the end-to-end flow of information so that you can start to look at data and look at analytics between the gaps. But I think now the way that everyone is pulling AI into every SaaS tool that you already use, starting to make sense of the unstructured elements of that data, photographs, visuals, things that can be captured and otherwise not useful. They can be interpreted in different ways. You can draw trends from them. So we're definitely starting to see, it's driving more adoption. It's driving more appetite for change as well. So it's reducing the barrier to change inertia, but it's increasing the barrier to prove that your software is actually going to solve all of the problem that you need it to solve.
Yeah, that maturity takes time to get to as a startup. You don't just build the final product overnight. You build it over time, and you build it with input from your clients and your customers. And I think that's also part of that adoption gap process, right? It's like, oh, well, it just doesn't do my specific need right now. And so I guess the answer is no. And then hopefully they'll come back and reevaluate it sometime, but a lot of times they don't. But now we see crazy new features coming out all the time. And it's like, if you're not reevaluating things quite often, you really are missing out, because that capability, it didn't used to exist 3 months ago, and now it does. The game has changed regards to even behavior of how we look at software that's being developed, not just in the architecture space, but in all ways.
I think something that your audience has always done well, and I've listened to some of the other entrepreneurs that have come on here, like Robert Yoon, Chris Parsons, and some really, really great people. And I think one of the things that they would probably agree with is a lot of firms end up picking a team. You may purchase Knowledge Architecture, Monograph, Part3, any of these tools. You purchase them initially because they solve a problem. But if the team becomes good to work with, you start to see them innovate. hopefully you just start to back that horse, you like nudge them in a direction, give the feedback that that group needs. I think it's easy to forget how influential you can be as an architect on the tools you use, even when you've got hundreds of different firms using the software like Part3, like Monograph, like those types of tools. You're constantly looking at those trends, looking at what people are saying, sharing notes from the calls that you have. So backing a team that you think listens and adopts and upgrades based on what you're saying. I think that's something that entrepreneurs are seeing more of now in all this noise in the tech space. I think people are starting to back a team that has a history of adopting and implementing what their customers say.
Do you think that that's part of the story when it comes to kind of the difference between, it takes a certain amount of inertia to adopt, but then at some point a tipping point could happen with a tool and then people are defending it and really, because they're still going to have internal skeptics potentially, right? And people who, been doing this longer, the way that they've always done it. And so it's like, so then you have to start kind of internally doing this, I don't want to call it a battle, but like this challenging situation inside of firms even to just standardize around the way that we do things based on the new way that's possible. What's that tipping point like when you go when you see a firm go from like adoption and the struggle of implementation to actually defending it and moving to the, I don't know, maybe it's an easier side of the mountain to go to traverse?
It's messy. I don't know if too many firms look the same, but you always feel it. There's always a moment in time when you can just feel things are happening. Sometimes it's because you get more questions from a customer than ever, and you're like, okay, now things were cooking because now they're looking for new things they can do, new ways to use it. Or feedback starts to come in hot and heavy because they've started to really understand it. So sometimes it can be counterintuitive. Hearing from a customer more is actually usually a good thing. But I think at an architecture firm, the first step is always to build those champions. So I think a lot of the success in how fast a rollout goes is typically in getting the right people in that first group. People that are, maybe more susceptible to change, asking for help and a problem they've got. Evan, I really need help to solve C8. What's out there? And then you might recommend 2 or 3 tools. They try Part3, they become a champion. And then now it's not me with an incredibly biased motive, pitching Part3 across the firm. It's someone saying, I used up this project, here's where the gaps were, here's what I liked, here's what the team's working on, here's why I think we should use it. And that story is the moment where things start to pick. It's usually just finding those first few champions within a firm and telling their story, because no one wants to be left behind.
When you say champions, I mean, that's loaded to me, because here's what I've seen in architecture firms, which is architecture firms throw like the junior or the recent grad on the CA process. And so can that person actually become a champion for you? Do you feel like, is this something that actually gives them the insight into that process? Man, I can't even tell you what it was like the first time that happened to me. I was like, you want me to do what?
You're under 25, so you're the tech expert, right?
And well, not only that, but you're the cheap person on the payroll, and this is a process where you're going to learn. Like, this is like part of earning your stripes in the industry, is being put on the construction administration phase of a project. And I just think like that a lot of firms do that strategy because talk about who has the most valuable time. It's not people who have time to go out and visit the site and do all the. It's just they've got problems to solve for deadlines tomorrow. And so they're going to send a scout out to, grab information and then bring it back to the actual decision makers. So you do earn your stripes in that regard, but it's also like, I think about your champions comment, and it's like, those are probably typically the people who are like, they're a champion in some regard, and maybe they can be an actual champion for change in the way you do things.
Yeah, it might. How do you feel it correlates? Like, to me, as we've started to see in particular AI immerse and emerge into the industry, I don't feel like tech adoption is as strongly correlated with age or seniority as I expected it to be. I've seen just as many folks, in their 20s reluctant to adopt new tools as I have folks at the twilight of their career, eager to bring something new in. And so I think it is hard to overgeneralize on career stage and age, but you're right. Like the nature of CA is there's typically 2 or 3 personas involved. A lot of the time, your core CA people are veterans. They're people who have been around the block. They know how to negotiate with owners, handle contractors. They know how to run a consultant team. So those
but
people
they're also on like that one super important project full time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
and that's where it gets
hospital.
hard is like they only have so much time in the day and they live in a job trailer on the site of the $1 billion hospital.
Yeah. And then what they do is they kind of staff usually like sort of administrative roles. People who I kind of think of them as the quarterback. They're not necessarily a trained architect or engineer, but they understand the contracts, they understand the workflows, everything comes into them. They quarterback it out and pass it to the right person, chase the right person for a follow-up. Again, those people, way too busy. They're usually on tens of projects. I spoke to someone this morning who said she was on 72 projects. Yeah. Might be too many.
I do not envy that person.
No.
How do you keep all
she's a
that
champ.
straight? Jeez.
I mean, I'm going to guess that they don't. But somehow they're tasked with it. But yeah, so you're right. Like typically when you're finding that champion, you've got to find one of those two, but you've got to find someone that works in a way that's reflective of the biggest project, the typical project. If you just guinea pig something on, you know, the young person that's got a bit of extra time on the $5 million project when your firm average is more like $50 million, $100 million builds, you do have to pilot new things on representative samples. Otherwise, you just end up taking that feedback with but, you know, most projects are harder than that. So it's not easy. That is the single biggest slowdown. But usually it's a matter of if they've come to us and they've reached out, it's usually a need. There's a team that's itching for change or needs to try something new, or a project that's about to start that won't work the way they do it. That becomes your champion. That's your advocate. It's usually justified by the timing and the need.
And that's really how you can drive at least the pilot of a project for that one project, which is a new project using a new process. It's really hard to do that in the middle of an existing project, right? It's almost impossible. And it probably won't lead to a good outcome, right? In your favor. But the idea of starting a new project with a new platform, you know, to do that pilot, and then you see that kind of shift. I'm sure you see some attrition at that point, but then talk about kind of how retention actually happens, because I think this is insightful for firms who are looking on how to implementation strategies that are successful, right? Because that's where things get actually really difficult inside of a firm. So you talked about champions, and I imagine that comes through a successful pilot project where it was better than the process we used to do by some order of magnitude. And then a firm decides, okay, more projects. I'm just curious, how do you see that that ramp happening?
Yeah, that is mostly it. Now, what most firms lack in an implementation strategy is literally just sitting down before you start and saying, why are we doing this? So what we'll try and do is we'll try and work with a firm and say, what do you care about? You know, like you came to us for a reason. Is it just because this project is big and scary? Or is it because there's a need to standardize or a need to do this, or you got sued recently and you need a better protection mechanism on all projects? If you don't have a clear story, you just know this isn't working and we want to grow the firm and we need something better, fine. But when a pilot starts, let's make sure we understand what we're measuring. So we'll usually sit down and we'll say, okay, like a software like ours should expect to impact in these ways. For us, it's easy. You should be able to respond to submittals faster than before, RFIs faster than before. You should be able to issue changes and maintain a drawing set without any manual overhead. Your consultants should feel like you collaborate more, and you should have a better audit and risk trail. No matter what software it is, you should very easily know like the 2-3 metrics you care about, and they should be easy enough to measure. You know, like things like submittals, the second you start a project, within 3 weeks, you're going to know if you're responding to submittals faster or not. It doesn't have to be a really long test. You can test that very, very quickly. And that usually is all it takes. And then we'll jump back on and we'll say, like, okay, well, we told you we expect you to respond to submittals 40% faster. You're a month in, how's it going? Great. Now's the time to say it's working. Every new project that starts should start this same way. You've set the standards, you've got the proof points. Get it on every new project as a nice, clean implementation strategy to go forward. A lot of firms just lack that, and they rely on like the one person to say, I like it or I don't like it.
Yeah. Well, it also makes me think about how enjoyable it is to use a new tool, and therefore you actually are looking forward to responding to those RFIs faster because it's not a painful process. I mean, that's one example in many different phases of a project. You could call that a design authoring tool that you like to use. You could call it, a communications tool that you like to use, et cetera, et cetera. But in this case, it just seems like, I mean, that's kind of an unspoken bias that does happen in implementation, which is if an employee is more satisfied, they feel like you care about that job that they have to do, versus kind of the other version of that, which was fragmented or broken or however you want to, describe it. I mean, that does matter. It does make a difference in kind of how they show up to do that job. And if you can put things in place that help them achieve that kind of state of mind or the way they present themselves and show up, that can make a big difference, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, like if you hate finding things tucked into settings and navigations, no matter how effective the salesperson says it is, you're always going to hate that tool. So yeah, I agree. There's a lot of that. And, people work with people. We definitely find that a lot of firms just really enjoy when they get to meet us and they get to do a training session or an onboarding, or they join a webinar or something like that. They sort of latch on. You bond over a common problem that needs to be solved. And that can bring firms together really well. There's firms that we've been working with for years, and I have good friends at those firms now. Like I won't go through Salt Lake City without stopping by one or two of those firms, as I did last week. I won't go through Atlanta without stopping by and saying hi to a couple of people. So you just sort of build friendships and you build connections with people too. But you're dead right. If the software's clunky and hard to use, it's never going to make an impact. It's never going to convince someone to make a change.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about kind of the Trojan horse thing that I'm thinking of here, because I don't think it's too often that I'm talking to a tool maker like yourself, technology software maker,
good title.
who is bridging the gap between these kind of distinct phases of the process. And so I'm curious what has happened when the next partner in the series of events, the contractor, sees an architect super organized and using a tool like this. Maybe they have their own platform, right? If they're a big company, I'm sure they do. And then I imagine there's probably some kind of a communication, a way to synchronize data between these that we should talk about. But what do they like? How do they take that? What are you hearing from the contractor side when they see an architect using a tool in this way?
I think initially it's do it quietly. As long as we don't know about it, we don't care. As long as you stay organized, you can do your thing.
As long as it gets the data into our thing in the way that we want, it's
exactly
fine. We won't talk about it. Okay.
Exactly. So integrations are great. Like, hey, you're using Procore, we're using Part3. Don't worry about it. They'll talk to each other. Okay, no problem. But you are right. I've seen both sides. I've seen architects adopt a tool because they have GCs that live out of Excel, and they say, you're now going to use this, and we want you to do things differently. And I've seen contractors that massively outsize the architects they work with, push them to say, use our tool or go and get your own, but you have to do something a bit better. And often clients tend to be the catalyst for a lot of this. They don't want to pay for disorganized trails, and they don't want to pay for duplicated efforts. They want to make sure everything lives in a single database and is visible to them, and that's not easy to do. So most of the time it's sort of triggered by the architect's need to counter, the size of the contractor they're working with. But contractors, I think they're probably just as far along or far behind, however you want to think of it, on the adoption curve. So typically there's not a massive resistance. It's just understanding that everyone needs their own records. And as long as we're not doubling up on efforts, as long as everything ends up visible, everyone's pretty happy.
So can you talk about that? Like, how do you handle the non-duplication of effort and information?
The biggest step is an integration. Like, despite using something like Procore, a lot, I don't want to speak for the entire industry and overgeneralize, but a very common thing that I'll hear is it's very difficult for an architect to work in Procore because as they're doing it, they're being watched. And they don't even know if their mechanical engineer is going to have a problem with it. So they don't want the contractor to see that they've approved it. They don't know if the structural engineer is going to shut this down. So they want to wait until that person's looked at it before anyone else can see it. So it makes the workflow really sort of fake automated. They end up taking it out of Procore and dealing with an email.
There's benefits to working in like a live environment, and there are downsides. And you're talking about just kind of this aversion to working in public all the time, right?
Yes, 100%. And I get that. I get that because a lot of the time someone is going to act on something that's still in flight or in progress. So that is kind of what we try and do. We try and take everything out of Procore, let you run and work in real time with the consultants and have permissions and controls that says at this moment in time, I can now share it with the contractor or the client. So you get to work with your consultants transparently and you get to share things with clients and contractors when you're done. And that feels like the right handoff, you know.
I like that. I did not know that you did that. That's very cool because we do this with clients too, architects I'm speaking of, right? It's like I'm 3 steps ahead on my model, on my massing model that has too many details in it to show the client, too many colors, too many materials, et cetera, et cetera. Turn off the textures, just as like a visualization example, because I don't want them to get hung up on X, Y, or Z. I want to talk about the spatial relationship, right? And so I get it. This idea of saying, okay, now you can look at this because I'm ready enough for you to look at it, or I'm quote unquote done. It's never done, right? But it's at least at a stage where I'm okay with you seeing it, and I don't feel like you're scrutinizing my messy process along the way because opinions do get formed. Feedback is going to be generated on an unfinished thing, and we don't work the same way. I'm incredibly okay with a messy process and things not being completely figured out until they are, because I have complete faith that they will get figured out. And so I really like the kind of the balance that you've struck there. That's really cool.
Yeah. I mean, that took some back and forth. We definitely started this thing way back when with the idea that raw transparency was the best thing for the industry and everything should be visible to everyone. And then very, drip by drip, request by request, so suddenly you start to give people the ability to hide things, default things hidden, and then transparency happens at the end of the project. But during the project, it's controlled transparency.
I mean, that's a really interesting take on the current kind of, you see a lot of collaboration tools being put into all kinds of software platforms right now. And live collaboration, I've always been a subscriber to live collaboration has a time and a place. And then I need to get some work done. And I don't need everybody in there messing around with the things and moving around and asking questions and putting in comments when it's clearly not ready for prime time yet. So again, I like the balance that you've struck.
It's a unique space, right? Construction, one of the cliches I like to throw out there is the most collaborative industry in the world, yet the most fragmented. So I think those moments when you pull someone together, put a team together to collaborate in real time, that's great. That's when you're reviewing a really complicated shop, you're installing a curtain wall and you need everyone to come together and look at something. That's great. But then you're right, you need to go away because now I've got 3 hours of detail to analyze and compare, and you don't want to be doing that part in public. You need some thinking time. I totally agree. You need to compromise for the fact that the project team has a single goal, but the fragmentation comes from the fact that it's 10, 15 different businesses with their own, baggage
incentives,
and drama and goals. Incentives.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. For sure. Okay, so I think when most people think of CA, do they think of it in a positive light? I have my version of CA, which was I wasn't the CA person, but I got to go visit the construction site and really kind of hone in on a few things. And so I did CA Light when I was designing buildings because there was a dedicated CA person who, it was their job to filter the things that I needed to talk about and filter the things that the structural engineer needed to talk about and only get the input from who they needed it from. But I think most people think of this kind of fragmented, reactive, manual, I'm kind of describing a lot of people's CA process with those words as, oh, not enjoyable, not looking forward to that. But I'm guessing you have a different vision for what CA could be.
I do. But I recognize that is the vibe. Most people don't want to do CA. Simple as that. It's because the parts of CA that you enjoy are watching your design come to life, watching construction, problem solving with contractors, proactively finding problems before they become a big deal. I think people enjoy that. People enjoy the actual process of construction. The CA... The realities of CA is it became pretty distant from that. That's become such a small part of the job. CA has become protection and it's become paperwork, administration.
For sure.
I think in any given day, if you truly watch someone that is, full-time CA for that day, you'll watch them shift. They'll go from being an architect in the morning to a project manager, to an accountant, to a lawyer.
Lots of hats. Yep, all the hats.
To a psychiatrist,
right.
managing the team. And then all the way back to an architect again in the same day.
To a janitor. I mean, there's tons of like you're literally sweeping up at some level. It could be data, it could be project stuff, but it's also like it's all the way down to those nitty gritty details. So.
And then you go back to your desk and you respond to the 35 emails and 35 RFIs, which all needs to be emailed out. And then you're chasing up all the consultants that have forgotten to get back to you on the deadline day, responding to the chases from the contractor. And then you've got to file all these things in your file system, upload them all into your contractor's file system. That stuff's just not fun. No one enjoys that. So I think
what's the vision? What's the vision?
There you go. I mean, that's
what could this be? What could this be?
What CA could be and what CA should be is just being there to manage design intent, aesthetic decisions, things that are really complicated that need the professional judgment. But all of that administration, the routing, the coordinating, the paperwork, the documentation, the audit trail, logging things in a file system, that should be automated. Software is
It should be automated, but like plenty of things are automated that I just seriously don't trust still, that they're automated correctly. And then, okay, maybe in a couple of years, I'll actually find out if it was trustworthy or not because I have to go back and look. That's when I'm forced to go back and look because whatever, lawsuit or a question or, something. And then I realize, oh crap, I couldn't actually trust it. Now I have a huge job. So, I mean, that's a big part of it too. And I think that's what a lot of people are struggling with the AI story right now is like, at some level, there's like this blind trust. And then on another level, it's like, well, I absolutely don't trust it. I'm going to read every word and I'm going to make sure there's a human in the loop on every different part of it. So we have this spectrum. But I assume AI is part of this story of the automation that you're talking about.
For sure. AI is the best way to route, coordinate, and do all the things that we talk about. It's the best way to automate administration. It should not automate professional judgment, but that's the whole point, right? It should be
you got to be able to
automating
separate those things. Yeah,
100%. And what you've also touched on is sort of the reason in the early days when startups are up and coming, that's kind of why it's so hard to get a foothold in the industry because you don't have those proof points. We've been through a few cycles now. We've seen projects go well. We've seen projects go badly. We've seen litigation happen. We've seen that Part 3 has enough to resolve litigation before it gets messy. So nowadays, that's less of a question mark over our heads. But when you're just starting out with a new solution in this industry, that is a big part of it. It takes years and years to build credibility and proof, to just see those scenarios, to see projects go all the way through construction. But my vision for it, 100%, is CA automation is automating the administration. If we can just really quickly get you to the point where we've said, this RFI, you've actually already answered it 3 times before in 2 different projects with this contractor. Here's what you said in the past. and then you let them run with it. They'll tweak that response, they'll edit it, or they'll just yell at their contractor for sending shitty RFIs. If the submittal that comes in they haven't identified the product series that they want to install, they forgot to slap on a warranty or tell you which color they were using, don't wait a week before you review that, only to find out it's missing stuff. That is where AI can immediately say, there's gaps, have a look, send it back now, and then you'll get the proper package the next day, as opposed to sitting there for 7 days and the contractor gets pissed off because they're starting again a week later.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess one of the questions I have about your vision is, because the way that we've been describing CA is just kind of this, where design intent either gets realized or negotiated away, but also as a cost center and not a profit center. So I'm curious, is that part of the vision too? Do you think that that's possible?
Well, maybe if we break down why it's a cost center today. It's a cost center today because we put senior staff members on it who are inherently more expensive, people that have the professional judgment needed. But then we asked them to do all of that administration and people chasing and data logging and Excel sheet chasing. And that is a really poor use of time. If we can enable that one really senior person on a project to run 3 projects or 4 projects instead of the one, then it's no longer a cost center. You can staff it efficiently, you can staff it better. We're already split across so many projects, and how many years do we have to show up to conferences and complain about a shortage of workforce, and skilled people don't want to get into CA, skilled people don't want to get into trades anymore. So the only solution really is automation, and some firms do make a lot of money in CA. It is possible.
Sure.
But it can't be done running a really janky process in spreadsheets and emails. It does take deliberate effort. And then you can also start to think a little bit more about the pricing model. I think we're going to start to see in architecture a pricing model shift over the next few years, which is probably long overdue. And I imagine it's something that you've been talking on this about for many years. I know Evelyn Lee came on a couple of years ago and spoke a lot about this too. So I think there's a shift already happening where architecture firms are starting to explore new ways to price and new ways to generate and show value. Because if you're spending less hours on CA, you still need to make sure you're there for the ride, for the same revenue, for the same value realization.
I mean, also just being able to effectively do CA if you haven't been doing it, if it's not a normal part of your contract, and you can add that as a value to your professional services, and you're doing it in a really effective way. I mean, that's a way to do what you just said, right? You're adding other valuable parts to your potential revenue, and that's giving you a healthier business, I would hope, right? I mean, it's new experiences. You got to figure out how to do it. But when you have an effective way to do it, and you're not just going in doing the Wild West style, then I imagine that's one way to start to achieve what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I always think as an architect, you'd probably be a little bit bummed out. As much as you might not enjoy CA, I think not seeing it through the construction phase would probably always leave a little bit of a hole in your heart, wanting to see that thing get built.
There's that part of it, of actually getting to be a part of that. But there's also the part of it where all those decisions get made without you. Right. And that is the heartbreaking part. Right.
The negotiations happening and you're not at the table.
You're not even there. Right. Because, yeah, that's rough.
So ensuring design intent is the minimum value proposition. And then hopefully you can start to prove and track and demonstrate how good you are. It's very easy to turn around and say, here's my portfolio of projects. Here's what makes them great. And by the way, we average a 3-day average response time to RFIs, and we average less than 40% of contract overage due to non-owner requested change orders. This is in the top 10 percentile of architecture firms in the country, and we're really proud of that stat. Now, you're showing them not only you're a good designer and you make good projects, but you can execute on the back end of a project when shit goes wrong really, really effectively. And that is a really critical way to differentiate as an efficient architecture practice, not just a design firm.
Yeah, I like that, because you actually have the metrics to show it. I mean, and otherwise you don't. That information, the metrics to that information are hidden across a totally fractured system, and you can't pull it out.
I was able to sit with a firm just last week and show them some numbers that they didn't even know they had. And it literally was able to show them, did you know you're in the top 10% of efficient CA firms in the country? And they had no idea. But this is the type of number that they're able to sort of bring in and brag about. And I do think otherwise you stop thinking about CA as administration. You start thinking about it as a competitive tool that is design intent on site.
Interesting. You talked a little bit about AI and the kinds of things that you can do. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more, just to give the audience an idea of where this is going, and maybe even where it's to be going to? Maybe it's not there yet, but I'm curious what you're seeing potentially happening here.
The immediate ways that AI should be helping CA is in categorizing, naming, and labeling and routing documents. So the immediate ways are, if you need to move drawings into a file, those drawings should be able to, you bring them in a really messy, unstructured way, but we can sort them, split them into sheets, name them, categorize them, maintain them. So every time you issue a new drawing or a change, we can just keep a set that's current. And then every time these sort of reactive workflows kick in, like an RFI, like a submittal, when your job is to respond and you're on the hook, the clock starts the second you received it, no matter where you are. The initial step is scanning those documents. So what we'll do is we'll scan that submittal and we'll tell you right off the bat if it's complete or if it should just be pushed back to the contractor. So we'll tell you should even bring this into your queue. If not, we'll push it back to the contractor right away. If you bring it into the queue, we'll help you with the review. We'll help you by saying, okay, this is, you're installing loops. We're going to help you look at the performance data. You can find it in this page 1500 of the specification document, and go to page 35 on the spec. This is where you're going to do your comparison. Here's what we found. What do you think? So everything that we do is surfacing potential gaps, potential areas for observation, but we're not stamping it. We're not overwriting professional judgment. We're just trying to draw your attention to low-hanging fruit and get there faster. And our viewpoint is, if we can make it so that you never spend any time on those really obvious mistakes and errors, most submittals will get responded to significantly faster, within 24 hours.
Can it do things like route the information to the right person on the team based on the content of the package?
That is about to come out. So what will very simple stuff like cabinet unit is hit the queue. We know that needs to go to a mechanical engineer. We'll push it straight out. Rooftop units come in. So we'll know very quickly for certain types of products, for certain types of shop drawings, which team members to pull in. Some of that is as easy as just knowing the division code. Some of it is just interpreting the product or interpreting what's hit the queue. But yeah, routing that out to the right people, and then automating simple reminders that don't overwhelm team members. Pull them in, let them know when the deadline is, let them know if they have to go first in the queue or last in the queue. All of that sort of stuff is really powerful, and either in there today or in there by the time this podcast hits the air.
Well, you talked about the quarterback earlier, right? And that's what the job of the quarterback on these extra large projects, or you've got multiple senior CA people on these different projects, and you've got their consultants and et cetera, et cetera. And just routing the information to the right eyeballs it's a job. And so
turning cats, right? Like you're chasing. Yeah.
Yes. So I could see that being a really valuable add-on to this system.
So, and this is all the low-hanging fruit. This is all, the minimum that we should be doing and that we're working on right now. When you start to look further out, you start to say, AI does have the ability to play a bigger role. AI has the ability to amalgamate your performance across shops and RFIs, to look at the drawings, to look at site visits and visuals, and start to generate construction progress reports and help you understand where the risks are and what decisions you've made that are documented or not, and start to understand what decisions you need to make soon. A lot of this is going to become, I think, the minimum expectations of AI in the next sort of 6 to 12 months. I think we're ahead of the curve in being able to generate all this data and being able to share with firms how they're doing and how they're protecting themselves. But we are going to start to see as well, like there's going to be more expectation to control a lot of the workflow and have data and insight from the beginning of a project or the beginning of breaking ground through every workflow, no matter what software it hits. So making sure you can deeply integrate to every tool that gets used and touched in that workflow. That will also be a really big part of where we focus, and then pulling data from those different systems into your reports. So when you've returned 100 submittals, 30 of them were closed in Procore, 2 of them were resubmitted, and you know where they are, you know the timelines, being able to sort of view across those different software, that's going to be a really, really important part, and AI is going to play a big role in that too.
Nice. I think about kind of the architect's role in taking away the minutia that you're talking about, taking away kind of the manual data entry part of it and giving the important judgment calls back to the architect. And I think one of the concerns that I sense with the AI thing is that a lot of the construction, the design and construction process is working around a set of constraints, right? It could be building code during the design process. It could be on-site logistics during construction, et cetera, whatever. Sequencing, for example. And a lot of times I could see a system, just AI, right, flagging something, and it's like, well, here's what the building code says about this. And it's like, well, here's the exception to the building code that I'm using to, there's a way for me as an architect to justify the thing that I'm doing. Like that's actually a huge part of an architect's job. And that goes through the whole process. And so when it comes to like AI flagging issues, I mean, it sounds like there's ways to override this. And I just want to kind of take away the fear of something making decisions on my behalf based on a quote unquote set of rules that's actually just kind of like a lowest common denominator baseline kind of a thing that I have a really tricky way to work around because of this exception in the building code or whatever. So can you just speak to kind of not taking away the architect's judgment, keeping the human in the loop for these really important things?
Some of this is going to be tricky, right? Because some of this is going to be behavior for all of us to not get lazy.
Right, and just accept... Yeah, just not accept what's given to you, right?
Because by nature, what AI will do is help you default to the average that exists out there. And we see that, if you use AI to create content, great, it does it much faster, but it creates the average type of content that exists out there. And if you're a great writer, you should probably aspire to do a little bit better. The same thing will happen in architecture. I think our role in the tech side will be to help you get to that point as fast as possible. So if we can make sure that minimum baseline you described, if you could just get there within minutes, well, now you've got the time to sit down and get creative and think about it and think through it. It is going to be tougher for younger people who are coming up with that baseline handed to them, and they didn't have to kind of go through the years of figuring it out for themselves and finding those workarounds. But I think that will come with just adjusting the way we educate and the way we train to showing how we got to that baseline faster. But our role will be to get to the baseline as quickly as possible. You're in California. Here are the minimum code standards. You're looking at this product. Here's what you specified. Here's what you're expecting. Here's what you got. Everything else is beyond, and off you go. But if there was any obvious gaps, obvious mistakes, obvious, omissions, you're going to find that really quickly. Architects, like everyone else, are going to have to find a way to make sure we use AI to make us faster and better, and not get a little lazy and then just default to the norm, default to the average.
You bring up this important point, which is like where I automatically go to when you're talking about this kind of a situation is context switching. So as an architect, like we talked earlier, there's many hats that you're wearing at the same time, especially in smaller offices. Yeah. And the tax to context switching is huge, because I just love the idea of an assistant. I don't care if it's digital or analog. In this case, it's like, remind me what we're talking about here. Remind me what it was that we specified versus this submittal that is for a substitution. And okay, it meets this performance criteria, but it doesn't meet this, various other things. Like just the ability to have that at your fingertips because context switching has attached to it. If I was just designing a new pool facility and then I have to switch over to the CA question for this portable project, for this K-12, whatever it is, it's like, that's a real thing. And how can you actually keep all of that in your mind? You can't. It's not possible. Stop thinking that it is possible, because it's not. And so to have that kind of assistant on a project sounds like, oh, we actually could get to that vision that you painted earlier.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be great? Like,
it would be.
the example I always hear is things like door hardware. If you're reviewing door hardware, you just sit down for a few days, and I don't know anyone that gets a few days uninterrupted to do that. So,
right.
Yeah, being able to pick it back up and say, where were we? Okay, we reviewed this part of the product. We were moving on to the schedules. We were looking at this. You are, as a reminder, looking at this for the second time because there was a problem the first time, which we know has been fixed. All that as a starting point, that saves you the tax. We used to say that context switching per task is a 10% tax. So you can be 100% focused on one thing, or you can be 45% focused on two things. And then every task you add, there's a 10% tax.
Right. More and more.
So I totally
10%.
agree. Yeah, more 10%. So this is just trying to get you that quick start. Remember where you were? You were here. This is what we looked at. This is what you hadn't looked at yet. This is what we got stuck on.
Yeah, I mean, that really moves you into a role of conducting, right? Directing over the project rather than doing. I mean, because at some level there is just a lot of minutia that you don't need to be dealing with. It's not the valuable part of the way you need to be spending your time at all. So I see a lot of promise there.
Yeah, 100%. What we are going to see is a lot of teams moving into similar spaces, solving it through the lens of a different person. We're applying really fun, really awesome agentic architecture to solve different parts of this problem. And agents are going to be deployed by a real architect to do countless things. Just one agent to go out there and categorize RFIs, and then to track the metrics behind them, and then to preempt responses for a certain category of them, and agents to analyze drawings, analyze shapes, analyze schedules, bring all that information back. And you're going to be able to coordinate them, and you're going to be able to use those responses, but you're just going to use them as interns or assistants to bring that in and make your own call, use your own judgment. So I think I think that's where we're going to see the whole industry heading. I think we're going to be a really, really fun part of that, and excited to ship more of it. But we are starting to see already a lot of these agents be deployed and start to work. They're starting to work now. We're at that interesting time where AI isn't just a promise. Some of it's actually starting to work, which is cool.
Yeah. You just said fun and exciting, like in the same, like we're talking about CA.
There you go. We did it. Yeah.
It's a interesting future that you're talking about. I think it sounds amazing. So I guess, okay, how do we get to the future? So let's wrap it up with like a final question here. Why should architects care about this now? Like, what should they start doing now and not wait 2 more years to start doing?
Yeah, good question. The single biggest problem most architects have in CA is a total lack of control. And it's not through a lack of wanting control. It's because we have let decisions be made without us, which means we don't dictate the tools, we don't dictate the workflows, and we don't dictate where information lives. The first step we need to take is truly understand what we're accountable for, what defines success for our firm, and then make sure we take control of the pieces that get us there. When it comes to CA, taking back control usually means owning the flow of information. It usually means having your own story, your own source of truth for every decision that was made, every activity that happened. And then it means owning the workflow of the sub-consultant team, making sure you have control over how sub-consultants work with you, where information should live, so that you're not duplicating efforts. I think the first step is just making sure we take back control. It's not taking on extra responsibility. It's just controlling what you're already accountable for. And then when we do that, we start to realize where the gaps are. Is it that we already have lost the ability to dictate who gets involved when? Have we already lost the ability to tell a story of when it was reviewed or why, or what context someone had at the moment in time that they responded to that RFI? Being able to tell that story is the single biggest battle. So the first thing we should do is start to deliberately take back control, and then find the solution that works for you. And hopefully it's part 3, but it might not be. But putting you in the position where you understand what your own firm's gaps are is probably a unique decision to make. So that's where I would start.
I think there's also pressure from, so this is kind of working from the other direction. There's pressure from owners and GCs and, people who are downstream of the design problem coming at designers to implement technology. I mean, that's a lot of architects have only implemented certain things because the owners ask for it or expect it. And I think that that's just getting more pervasive now because we're seeing leaps in all different areas that technology touches. And so why not my architect too? And so getting ahead of that, right? Getting ahead of waiting for a client to ask for it, I think is also something that could be a reason to get involved now and rather than wait a couple of years for it.
Well, we know that every innovation has always come with a change in client expectations in every industry, in every profession. And this is no different. I think the first thing we're seeing in other industries is that where AI can do a job or where technology can do a job, clients push back on paying for that. So a CA process that is billed hourly and it includes line items like, 6 hours to build a field report in Microsoft Word, those are really easy areas where your client is going to start to say no. So you need to find solutions and a pricing model that says, we'll deliver the design intent, we'll handle every aspect of CA. We're not going to spend 1,000 hours on Word documents and email batches and coordinating team members. Instead, we're going to automate that. But it's the same value, it's the same professional judgment, it's the same level of skill, not hourly, but based on value. And then you'll avoid that pushback. But you're right. Clients will not stand for that level of manual overhead, that level of admin anymore. Not when technology is visibly performing that for their other architects or their other projects.
Well, Jack, this has been a fantastic conversation. There's so much in here, and this conversation doesn't happen enough that I'm aware of. Like this process of a project is something that we could be paying a lot more attention to without that much effort. It feels to me like there's huge advances being made here, and it's just, like you said earlier, you just kind of have to be proactive about making it happen for yourself, and then the low-hanging fruit becomes the important things rather than the manual stuff that nobody likes to do. And we can actually transform this process into something that could be, oh my goodness, profitable. What would that be like? So it sounds
profitable,
amazing.
Differentiating, valuable and fun.
Right. Well, Jack, thank you so much. This has been great.
Thanks for having me. I'm really glad we got to make this work.